If you eat eggs every single day, are you quietly helping your metabolism or slowly hurting it? Most people have a strong opinion about eggs, usually based on headlines rather than data. Some see them as tiny cholesterol bombs, others treat them like the perfect natural multivitamin. But your body does not react to food based on myths or trends. It reacts through measurable signals in your blood that tell a very specific story. Those signals are what scientists call metabolic markers. They are numbers that can show whether your body is burning energy efficiently, storing too much fat, inflamed, or moving in the direction of diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Daily eggs do not simply raise cholesterol or build muscle. They push and pull on several of these markers at the same time in ways that are more complex than a simple good or bad label. In this video, we are not going to rely on fear or hype. We are going to walk through what actually happens to key metabolic markers when eggs show up on your plate every day, and why different people can get almost opposite results from the same food. Stay with me until the end, because only when you see the full picture across multiple markers does the real answer to friend or foe make sense. When researchers talk about metabolic markers, they are not speaking in vague wellness language. They are looking at specific things in your blood that can be measured again and again. Classic markers include fasting glucose, insulin, triglycerides, different types of cholesterol, and sometimes hormones like leptin or adiponectin. Those numbers together tell how your body handles energy from food and how much strain your metabolism is under. Think of these markers as a dashboard in a car. Glucose shows how much sugar is circulating. Insulin reveals how hard your body is working to keep that sugar under control. Triglycerides and different cholesterol fractions are linked to how fat is being transported and stored. Inflammatory markers and oxidative stress markers add another layer, showing if your tissues are being damaged quietly in the background. No single number tells the whole story, but patterns do. Daily egg consumption is interesting because it can nudge several of these markers at once. Egg components like dietary cholesterol, phospholipids, and high-quality protein do not just pass through, they interact with liver metabolism, gut absorption, and even hormone regulation. So when we ask, what happens if you eat eggs every day? What we really mean is, how does this one habit reshape the pattern on that metabolic dashboard over time? An egg looks simple on the plate, but nutritionally it is dense and highly active in metabolic terms. One whole egg brings complete protein with all essential amino acids, which helps repair tissues and maintain lean mass. That matters because muscle is one of the main places where glucose is used, so protecting muscle through adequate protein can indirectly support better blood sugar control. The protein in eggs is also very satiating, which can influence how much you eat later in the day. Beyond protein, eggs carry fat in a very particular package. The yolk contains a mix of saturated and unsaturated fats, phospholipids, and dietary cholesterol. Those lipids travel through your digestive system in particles that your liver and blood vessels have to manage. That interaction affects triglycerides and different cholesterol fractions. It is one reason why eggs have been at the center of debates about cardiovascular risk, but the response is not the same for everyone. Eggs are also one of the richest food sources of choline, and they provide vitamins like B12, B6, folate, vitamin D, and fat-soluble antioxidants such as lutein and zeaxanthin. Choline is crucial for liver fat metabolism and for making cell membranes. Antioxidants help buffer oxidative stress. So inside that small shell, you have nutrients that can push metabolic markers in both protective and potentially risky directions. The real question is how your individual biology responds to that package over days, weeks, and years. For many people, the first thing that comes to mind with daily eggs is cholesterol. One egg yolk does contain a significant dose of dietary cholesterol, and for a long time the assumption was simple: eat more cholesterol, raise blood cholesterol, increase risk. But human biology is more adaptive than that. The liver can dial its own cholesterol production up or down, and many people show only modest changes in blood cholesterol when they eat eggs regularly. Studies suggest that for a large share of the population, daily eggs tend to raise HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, and may shift LDL particles toward a larger, less dense pattern that is considered less atherogenic. At the same time, triglycerides often do not worsen, especially when eggs are part of a balanced diet rather than added on top of excessive refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed fats. So the simple idea that eggs automatically ruin your cholesterol markers does not hold up well when you look at controlled trials. However, there is a subgroup of people known as hyperresponders, whose LDL can rise more sharply when they increase dietary cholesterol. Genetics, baseline diet, and metabolic health status all play a role here. For those individuals, daily eggs might lead to a pattern of higher LDL that deserves medical attention and careful context. So when you hear someone say eggs are clearly safe or clearly dangerous for cholesterol, they are usually ignoring how differently these markers can react from one person to another. Eggs by themselves are naturally low in carbohydrates, which means they do not cause a spike in blood sugar. When you eat eggs at breakfast instead of a refined carbohydrate meal, you tend to see a flatter glucose curve and a lower insulin response over the next few hours. That can be helpful for people who struggle with insulin resistance or energy crashes after high-sugar meals. The combination of protein and fat in eggs slows gastric emptying and prolongs satiety, which can also reduce the urge to snack on sugary foods. Over time, what really matters from metabolic markers is the pattern of meals, not a single breakfast. If daily eggs help you choose fewer ultra-processed foods and less added sugar, your fasting glucose and fasting insulin markers may look calmer and more stable. On the other hand, if you pile eggs on top of a diet that is already high in refined carbohydrates and excess calories, you may not see any benefit at all. The eggs themselves are not magically fixing insulin sensitivity, but they can be part of a pattern that supports it. Since we're talking about your routine, I'm curious, how do you usually eat your eggs? Scrambled with toast, boiled with vegetables, or inside a fast food sandwich? Drop a comment with your go-to egg meal and whether you feel more energized or more sluggish afterward. In a moment, I'll show you how inflammation, oxidative stress, and even genetics can change the way the same food affects different people. When researchers look beyond cholesterol and sugar, they often measure inflammation and oxidative stress. These are quiet processes that do not hurt immediately, but over time they can damage blood vessels, joints, and organs. Some people worry that the fats in eggs might increase inflammation, while others point to nutrients in the yolk that could actually protect cells. So the question is not only what happens to cholesterol, but whether daily eggs nudge your body toward more damage or more defense. Several trials have checked markers like C-reactive protein and different oxidative stress molecules in people who add eggs to their diet. In many healthy individuals, daily eggs do not seem to drive a big spike in inflammation, especially when the rest of the diet is rich in vegetables and minimally processed foods. The antioxidants in the yolk, like lutein and zeaxanthin, may even support the body's own protective systems, so the impact is very context-dependent. On the flip side, in people who already have obesity, diabetes, or a highly inflammatory lifestyle, adding eggs on top of a poor diet might not be neutral. If daily eggs arrive together with processed meats, fried foods, sugary drinks, and poor sleep, the mix can amplify oxidative stress. In other words, eggs are not a free pass, but they are also not a guaranteed source of inflammation. They tend to follow the direction your overall lifestyle is already pointing. One of the most confusing parts about egg research is how different the results can be between people. You might know someone who eats eggs every morning and has great lab work, while another person sees LDL cholesterol climb after the same habit. A big piece of this puzzle is genetics. Variants in genes involved in cholesterol transport, lipid metabolism, and even choline processing can change how strongly your markers react to dietary cholesterol and fat. Your gut bacteria are another layer between eggs and your blood. Microbes in the intestine can transform some egg components, like choline, into compounds that the liver further modifies. In some individuals, this pathway is more active and might be linked to higher levels of certain metabolites that have been associated with cardiovascular risk. In others, the same intake of eggs leads to a very different metabolic footprint because their gut ecosystem behaves differently. Lifestyle ties everything together. A person who exercises regularly, sleeps well, manages stress, and eats plenty of fiber-rich foods will process daily eggs within a completely different background than someone who is sedentary, sleep-deprived, and powered mostly by ultra-processed snacks. That is why studies often show that eggs can fit comfortably into a generally healthy pattern, while risk appears when the rest of the pattern is already pushing metabolic markers in the wrong direction. When scientists design human studies on eggs, they do not usually test 10 eggs a day. Most controlled trials focus on roughly 1 to 3 whole eggs daily, eaten for several weeks or months, and then measure changes in metabolic markers. Within that range, many studies in healthy or moderately at-risk adults have not shown dramatic harm when eggs replace less nutritious foods. In some cases, improvements in satiety and HDL cholesterol are seen. However, that does not mean there is no upper limit. Large observational studies, which follow people for many years, suggest that extremely high intakes of cholesterol-rich foods, especially in the context of Western-style diets, can be associated with higher cardiovascular risk. It is difficult to separate the effect of eggs themselves from bacon, refined carbs, and other foods that often appear on the same plates. Still, the data do not support the idea that more is always better just because eggs are nutrient-dense. So far, the safest ground seems to be moderate daily intake for most people, especially when eggs are replacing processed meats or sugary breakfast items instead of simply being added to an already heavy diet. Special groups, such as individuals with advanced diabetes, significant cardiovascular disease, or known genetic lipid disorders, might need personalized advice and tighter limits from their healthcare provider. The science points more toward dose and context than a universal yes or no. How you cook eggs matters almost as much as how often you eat them. Boiled or poached eggs keep added fats low and avoid creating extra oxidation products that appear when oils are heated repeatedly at high temperatures. Scrambled eggs cooked gently with a small amount of stable fat can also be part of a reasonable approach. In contrast, eggs fried in reused oils or combined with large portions of processed meats bring extra compounds that are not friendly to metabolic markers. What you eat with eggs is just as important. Pairing eggs with fiber-rich vegetables, whole grains, or avocado changes the way your body handles the meal. Fiber can slow digestion, soften blood sugar responses, and help with cholesterol handling over time. Healthy fats from sources like olive oil or nuts can support better lipid patterns compared with processed seed oils and trans fats. So the plate as a whole sends a combined signal to your metabolism. Think of a classic fast food egg sandwich with white bread, processed cheese, and sausage. Now compare that to an omelet loaded with spinach, tomatoes, and a side of berries. On paper, both contain eggs, but in reality they have completely different effects on metabolic markers because of sodium, refined flour, processed meats, and overall calorie density. Daily eggs become much safer and more helpful when they live in the second scenario rather than the first. Now that you have seen how eggs touch cholesterol, blood sugar, inflammation, genetics, and lifestyle, the verdict is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. For many generally healthy people, 1 or 2 eggs a day, cooked in a gentle way and combined with whole, minimally processed foods, can fit into a balanced diet without wrecking metabolic markers. Some markers may even improve, such as HDL cholesterol, satiety, and blood sugar stability across the morning. At the same time, there are clear situations where daily eggs deserve more caution. If you already have cardiovascular disease, very high LDL cholesterol, diabetes that is hard to control, or a strong family history of early heart problems, then your response to dietary cholesterol might be less forgiving. In those cases, checking your blood work and discussing egg intake with a healthcare professional is not overreacting. You might still enjoy eggs, just with a more tailored limit. So the honest, science-based answer is this. Eggs are powerful, not neutral. They can be a compact ally for your metabolism or an extra load on a system that is already struggling, depending on your biology and your habits. If you want to test how daily eggs affect you, do it intentionally. Clean up the rest of your plate, stay active, and track your markers with proper lab tests over time. And if this breakdown helped you see eggs in a more realistic way, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still thinks an egg is either a villain or a miracle food with no middle ground.